你是不是也常常在某些关系里，感觉自己快要窒息了？每次只要手机一响，看到那个熟悉的历史名字，或是某个你不得不面对的群组跳出新讯息，你的心跳就会漏掉半拍。你在心里演练了无数次拒绝的台词，但最后只要对方用一种带着失望、受伤，甚至是责备的眼神看着你，你那句到了嘴边的对不起，又会自动变成好，没问题，我来处理。我们每个人在生活中，或多或少都正在扮演那个试图讨好全世界，最后却唯独背叛了自己的人。今天我们要聊的这本书，在很多人的书架上都躺了很久。它的名字叫做《被讨厌的勇气》。很多人第一次看到这个书名的时候，心里大概都会有一种直觉的反弹。每个人都想要被爱、被认同、被渴望，为什么我们需要被讨厌的勇气？难道我们活着的目的，竟然是去收集别人的讨厌吗？这本书的副标题写得非常动人，自我启发之父阿德勒的哲学课。在台湾，这本书可以说是一个现象级的存在。无论你在捷运上，在独立咖啡馆里，还是在某个深夜渴望寻求心灵解脱的社群动态里，你一定都看过这本书的踪迹。但今天我不打算带你走马看花的去读那些已经被划线划到烂掉的名言佳句。我想和你一起，把我们自己放进这本书的字里行间，去看看阿德勒这个人，他到底在他的生命底层看见了什么，才决定要开出这么一剂听起来极度叛逆，却又无比精准的特效药。说到这本书的诞生，我们非得先聊聊阿德勒这个人。阿尔弗雷德阿德勒，他和弗洛伊德、荣格并称为心理学界的三巨头。但如果你去翻看他的生平，你会发现他的一生，简直就是一场为的是摆脱宿命而展开的巨大叛逆。阿德勒小时候的身体非常虚弱，他得过严重的佝偻病，导致他走路总是摇摇晃晃。更糟糕的是，他在很小的时候，就亲眼看着自己的弟弟在睡梦中过世。他自己也曾因为严重的肺炎，差点在5岁那年就向世界告别。当时的医生甚至对他的父亲说，这个孩子没救了。你可以想象一个在死亡阴影下长大的小男孩，看着身边那个身体强壮、事事优秀的哥哥，心里会累积多少自卑与恐惧吗？如果按照弗洛伊德的理论，阿德勒这辈子大概已经拿到了受害者剧本。弗洛伊德认为，一个人童年的创伤，就像是写进 DNA 的程式码，决定了你长大后会成为什么样的人。你的焦虑、你的恐惧、你的无能为力，全都是因为你过去经历了那些不幸。但是，阿德勒不服气，他用他的一生去推翻了这种宿命论。他非但没有死于肺炎，反而奋发图强当上了医生。在第一次世界大战期间，他作为军医，在战场上目睹了无数被战争摧残得体无完肤、精神崩溃的士兵。在那个人类最黑暗、最绝望的历史现场，阿德勒突然看清了一件事：如果过去的创伤真的决定了未来，那么这些活在人间炼狱里的士兵，这辈子就再也没有幸福的可能了。他不愿意接受这种冰冷的结论，于是阿德勒转过身，对着全人类喊出了那句最震撼的话：决定我们人生的，不是过去的经历，而是我们自己为这段经历赋予的意义。执着于寻找原因，只是在为当下的不勇敢找借口。这就是阿德勒的命运。他必须写下这些文字，因为他自己就是那个从自卑的深渊里，一步一步靠着自己的意志，重新站起来的活生生见证。那么，阿德勒在这本书里，到底对我们刺下了哪一刀？如果今天你只能从这集节目里带走一个概念，我希望是这个彻底颠覆你认知逻辑的概念——目的论。我们从小到大，大脑的思考模式都是原因论。什么是原因论？比如，你今天之所以不敢在主管面前表达真实想法，是因为你小时候只要一顶嘴就会被父母痛骂。你今天之所以没有办法维持一段长久的情感关系，是因为你活在一个缺乏爱的单亲家庭。你今天之所以常常迟到，是因为台湾的交通实在太混乱，公车太难等。我们总是习惯把现在的某种结果归咎于过去的某个原因。这种思考方式很舒服，因为它让我们变成了无辜的受害者。不是我不想努力， 是过去发生的事把我绑架了。但是阿德勒的观点非常冷酷，他狠狠地一刀切断了这种因果链。他说，不，你完全搞错了。那些你以为的原因，其实都是你为的是达到某种目的而故意制造出来的手段。这句话听起来是不是让人非常不舒服？我们来看一个书中最经典也最让人心惊肉跳的例子。有一个年轻人，他常年把自己关在房间里。他非常想走出去，想和正常人一样去工作，去交朋友。但是他只要一踏出房门，心跳就会漏拍，手脚发抖，全身冒冷汗。他看过很多医生，大家都说这是社交恐惧症，是因为他童年受过家暴，或者是在学校被霸凌过。这就是标准的原因论。然而阿德勒却好整以暇地看着这个年轻人，对他说，不，你是因为先有了不想出门的目的，所以你的身体才非常配合地制造出了焦虑、恐惧和手脚发抖的症状。这太荒谬了吧？怎么会有人想要让自己受苦，目的竟然是不想出门？阿德勒解释说，请你看看这个年轻人不出门可以得到什么好处。只要他待在房间里不出门，父母就会一辈子担心他，关心他，小心翼翼地伺候他。他在那个小小的房间里，可以拥有绝对的特权，每个人都要围着他转。更重要的是，只要他不踏出房门，他就永远不需要面对真实社会的残酷竞争。他不需要面对面试失败的挫折，不需要面对谈恋爱被拒绝的痛苦，不需要面对自己其实只是一个普通人的真相。在房间里，他是个怀才不遇、被创伤困住的悲剧主角。一旦走出去，他可能就只是一个在台北街头找不到工作的平凡人。为的是逃避平凡，为的是获得父母的关注，他大脑的潜意识发出了指令，命令身体立刻制造出恐惧。这就是阿德勒的目的论。你不是因为愤怒才大声斥责别人，你是为的是达到威吓对方，让对方听话的目的，才选择了愤怒这种工具。你不是因为过去太不幸才活得这么痛苦，你是为的是维持现状，不想承担改变的风险，才选择继续紧紧抱着痛苦不放。当我第一次读懂目的论的时候，我感觉自己像是被扒光了衣服站在镜子前面，无处可躲。阿德勒把我们最后的避难所给拆了。他告诉我们，你现在的生活，无论多糟糕、多无奈，全都是你自己在每一个当下，为的是某种目的而亲自挑选出来的。既然生活是我们自己选的，那为什么我们每天还活得这么痛苦，这么累？阿德勒给出的第二刀，叫做课题分离。这4个字，可以说是治疗现代人社群焦虑和人际关系内耗的终极解药。阿德勒说，人类所有的烦恼，全都是人际关系的烦恼。而人际关系的烦恼，基本上都来自于你盲目的去干涉别人的课题，或是你让别人来干涉你的课题。那要怎么分辨这是谁的课题？方法其实很简单，你只要去看这个决定所带来的最终结果，究竟是由谁来承担。比如说，父母每天在耳边叨念，逼着孩子去考医学院，去考公务员，不考就是不孝顺。这就是父母严重干涉了孩子的课题。因为读书的是孩子，未来过那种生活的也是孩子，最终承担这个职业选择好坏结果的人，是孩子自己，而不是父母。所以，要不要努力读书，要选择什么科系，是孩子的课题。而父母看到孩子不读书，心里感觉到焦虑、没面子，那则是父母自己需要去处理的心理课题，而不是孩子的责任。反过来说，如果我们把场景搬到现代人的社群媒体上，你今天在网络上发了一篇文章，分享了你对某个投资市场的看法，或是你对某部电影的真实评价。结果没多久，底下开始涌入一大堆酸民的留言，疯狂地攻击你，嘲笑你。这个时候，你开始整天魂不守舍，饭也吃不下，睡也睡不好，甚至开始怀疑自己是不是做错了什么。阿德勒会摇摇头对你说，你又越界了。在网络上真诚地表达自己的观点，这是你的课题。而别人看完你的观点之后，是要喜欢你、认同你，还是要讨厌你，甚至用恶毒的言语攻击你， 那是别人的课题，与你一点关系也没有。你再怎么努力，你都没有办法控制别人的大脑。如果你活着的目的是为的是满足别人的期待，是为的是不被任何人讨厌，那你就是把自己生命的遥控器拱手让给了那些你甚至根本不认识的陌生人。当你学会了课题分离，你就会明白，那些看似错综复杂的人际网罗，其实只要拿着课题分离这把剪刀，咔嚓一声，就能剪得干干净净。别人的情绪是别人的课题，我的选择是我的课题。我对你释出善意，这是我的课题。你愿不愿意回报我同样的善意，那是你的课题。当你能够分得这么清楚的时候，你内心那股想要讨好全世界的紧绷感才会真正的松开。作为一个常年和文字和声音打交道，每天都在面对大众点阅与评论的创作者，我必须老实告诉你，我对阿德勒的这份清单有着非常复杂且诚实的挣扎。在很大的程度上，我非常感激这本书。它在我很多次面临自媒体的数据焦虑，看到那些不理性的负面评论而感到沮丧的时候，像是一记当头棒喝。它告诉我 ，Jenny， 你的存在感不需要建立在那些冰冷的点阅率和随风而逝的赞美上。那些酸言酸语是他们自己的生命课题，不是你的。课题分离这4个字，真的在无数个深夜里，把我从自我怀疑的流沙中给拉了出来。它照亮了我生命观里最核心的部分，那就是拿回自己的主体性，不卑不亢地活着。但与此同时，我坐在这里，看着这本书的字里行间，我的心里其实一直隐隐约约有一种不舒服的感觉。这种不舒服来自于阿德勒那种近乎不近人情的绝对理性。阿德勒的目的论，在某些时刻，听起来真的很像是一种变相的冷酷。当我们对一个正在经历严重忧郁症，或是刚刚经历了巨大丧亲之痛的朋友说，你现在之所以走不出来，是因为你抱着痛苦有特殊的目的，你是在用痛苦来逃避现实。这真的是一种善意吗？我觉得，这世界上有很多创伤，它的重量是远远超出人类理智所能负荷的。如果我们把所有的困境、所有的苦难，都100%归咎于个人的选择与目的，这是不是在无形之中抹杀了人类基因的局限性，也忽略了社会结构、阶级，甚至运气对一个人的巨大不平等影响？有时候，我们需要的可能不是大刀阔斧的目的论，而仅仅是一个温暖的拥抱，一个允许自己可以暂时无能为力，可以暂时躲在原因论里哭泣的避风港。我觉得，这本书最大的局限性，就在于它把人性的复杂切割得太过黑白分明了。它是一本非常完美的强者哲学，但对于那些正在风雨中摇晃，连站都站不稳的弱者来说，这种过度高标的自我掌控要求，有时候反而会变成另一种沉重的道德枷锁。今天和大家聊了这么多，我们从阿德勒童年的自卑与对抗命运的执着，聊到了彻底翻转我们认知因果的目的论，再到那把剪断人际内耗的课题分离。这本书说到底，并不是要我们去学会怎么自私，怎么冷漠地去对待世界，而是要我们在面对世界的嘈杂时，有勇气在自己的生命里站稳脚跟。如果你这周想要试试看一个小小的改变，我想邀请你一起做一件事。这周，当你再次遇到有人对你提出不合理的要求，或是你又在某个社群动态，在职场的人际关系里感觉到快要被别人的情绪淹没的时候，请你在心里默默地对自己说一句话：这是他的课题，不是我的。然后，请你试着转过身，把注意力重新放回你今天晚餐想吃什么，你走在路上的步伐是不是够轻盈，你今天有没有对镜子里的自己微笑。谢谢你今天来听我闲聊。被讨厌的勇气，其实就是你愿意放手，让别人去承担他们自己情绪的勇气。希望这句话能变成这周揣在你口袋里的一颗小石头，在那些你快要动摇的时刻，带给你一点点沉静而坚定的力量。我们下个周末见。Have you ever felt completely suffocated in your relationships? Think about that moment when your phone vibrates, you glance down, and you see a specific name pop up on the screen. Or maybe it is a new message in a group chat that you simply cannot ignore. Your heart skips a beat. Your stomach tightens. You have rehearsed your refusal 100 times in your head. You know exactly what you want to say to protect your own time and your own sanity. But the moment you face them, the very moment they look at you with that subtle look of disappointment, hurt, or silent accusation, your carefully practiced boundaries completely crumble. That phrase called "I am sorry" that was right on the tip of your tongue automatically transforms into "yes, sure, no problem, I will take care of it." Every single one of us has been there. At some point in our lives, we have all played the role of the person who tries so desperately to please the entire world, only to end up betraying the one person who needed us most: ourselves. Today we are diving deep into a book that has probably been sitting on your bookshelf for a very long time. It is a book titled The Courage to be Disliked. When most people first encounter this title, they experience an immediate, almost instinctive internal resistance. We are wired to want love. We want approval. We want to be desired and validated by those around us. Why on earth would we ever need the courage to be disliked? Is the purpose of our existence really to go out into the world and collect the disapproval of others? The subtitle of this book carries a profound promise. It reads called The Japanese Phenomenon That Shows You How to Change Your Life and Achieve Real Happiness. Here in Taiwan, this book is not just a bestseller. It has been an absolute cultural phenomenon. No matter if you are riding the Taipei Metro, sitting in a quiet independent coffee shop, or scrolling through late-night social media posts looking for some semblance of mental peace, you have undoubtedly crossed paths with this book. But today, I do not intend to give you a superficial tour. I am not going to just walk you through the standard chapter summaries or recite the famous quotes that everyone has already highlighted 1,000 times. Instead, I want us to throw ourselves completely into the space between the lines. I want to explore what Alfred Adler saw at the absolute bedrock of his life experience that forced him to prescribe such a rebellious, sharp, and uncompromising remedy for the modern soul. To truly understand the genesis of this book, we have to start with the man behind the philosophy: Alfred Adler. He is universally recognized alongside Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung as one of the three great giants of modern psychology. But if you strip away the academic titles and peer into his actual biography, you quickly realize that his entire life was one massive, heroic rebellion against fate. Adler was an incredibly frail child. He suffered from severe rickets, a condition that left his bones weak and made his walk unstable and awkward. To make matters worse, when he was just a young boy, he woke up one morning to find his younger brother had passed away peacefully right next to him in their shared bed. Adler himself contracted a case of pneumonia so severe that at the age of 5, he nearly closed his eyes to this world forever. The physician attending to him actually looked at his father and said bluntly, called this child as lost. There is no hope for him. Can you imagine what it feels like to grow up under the suffocating shadow of death? Imagine being that weak, sickly little boy, constantly looking up at your older brother who was healthy, athletic, and effortlessly successful in everything he did. How much inferiority, resentment, and terror would accumulate in your heart? If you were to analyze this situation using the traditional theories of Sigmund Freud, you would conclude that Adler had been handed a tragic script for his life. Freud believed that our childhood traumas are like immutable lines of code written into our spiritual DNA. They determine exactly who you will become as an adult. Your current anxiety, your deepest fears, your feelings of helplessness are all considered the direct and unchangeable results of what happened to you in your past. But Adler flatly refused to accept this. He spent his entire existence tearing down this philosophy of determinism. He did not die of pneumonia. Instead, he fought through his physical limitations and became a brilliant medical doctor. During the dark days of the First World War, he served as a military physician on the front lines. Day after day, he stood in fields covered in blood, witnessing countless soldiers whose minds and bodies had been completely shattered by the horrors of trench warfare. In that darkest, most hopeless theater of human history, Adler had a sudden, crystal-clear realization. If the past truly dictated the future, if our early traumas completely determined our destiny, then these broken soldiers, and indeed anyone who has ever suffered, would never have a single chance at genuine happiness again. He could not settle for such a cold, deterministic conclusion. So, Adler turned his back on traditional psychoanalysis and shouted a revolutionary truth to the world. He said that we are not determined by our experiences, but the meaning we give them is self-determining. He argued that obsessing over finding the historical causes of your pain is nothing more than a convenient excuse to avoid the terrifying responsibility of changing in the present. This was Adler's destiny. He was absolutely compelled to write these principles because he himself was the living, breathing proof of his own philosophy. He was the man who had climbed out of the deepest abyss of childhood inferiority entirely through the power of his own choices. So, what is the sharpest blade that Adler plunges into our comfortable worldview in this book? If there is only one singular concept that you take away from our conversation today, I want it to be this incredibly disruptive idea. Teleology. The psychology of purpose. From the moment we are born, our brains are deeply conditioned to think in terms of etiology. The psychology of cause and effect. What is etiology? For instance, you might say called the reason I do not dare to speak up and express my true feelings in front of my boss is because when I was a child, my parents would scream at me whenever I talked back. Or you might say called the reason I am incapable of maintaining a long-term romantic relationship is because I grew up in a broken, loveless home. Or perhaps called the reason I am constantly late for my appointments is because the traffic in New Taipei City is completely chaotic and the buses are impossible to predict. We have this powerful habit of blaming our present failures on past causes. It is a very comfortable way to live because it transforms us into innocent victims. It allows us to say called it is not that I do not want to improve, it is just that the things that happened to me in my past have taken me hostage. But Adler's perspective is wonderfully brutal. He steps forward and slices right through this causal chain with a single stroke. He looks at us and says called no, you have it completely backward. Those things you think are the causes of your behavior are actually tools that you are deliberately manufacturing in order to achieve a hidden purpose in your present life. Let that sink in for a moment. It is an intensely uncomfortable thought, is it not? How could anyone possibly choose to suffer? Why would our subconscious ever want to manufacture anxiety or pain? Let us look at one of the most famous and striking examples provided in the book. There is a young man who has spent years completely shut away in his bedroom. He is a total recluse. He tells everyone that he desperately wants to go outside. He wants to find a job, build a career, and make friends just like a normal person. But there is a massive obstacle. The moment he steps even 1 inch outside his bedroom door, his heart begins to race frantically. His hands shake. His body breaks out in a cold, terrifying sweat. He has visited the best doctors, and they all give him the same diagnosis. They tell him he has severe social anxiety disorder, rooted in childhood bullying or domestic neglect. This is classic etiology. The cause explains the effect. However, Adler looks at this young man not with pity, but with a sharp, penetrating gaze. He says called no. You are not staying inside because you are anxious. You are manufacturing anxiety because your primary purpose is to avoid going outside. Think about how absurd that sounds at first. Why would anyone want to stay locked in a room? Adler asks us to look at what this young man actually achieves by remaining in that room. As long as he stays confined inside his 4 walls, his parents will worry about him forever. They will dedicate their entire lives to taking care of him. They will tread lightly around him, treating him with the utmost gentleness and care. Inside that small bedroom, he holds an absolute monopoly on power. The entire household revolves around his existence. But even more importantly, as long as he stays inside that room, he never has to face the brutal, unpredictable competition of the real world. He never has to experience the sting of a failed job interview. He never has to feel the rejection of a broken heart. He never has to confront the terrifying reality that he might just be an ordinary, average human being. Inside that room, he gets to remain the tragic, misunderstood hero of an unwritten epic. The moment he steps outside, he becomes just another regular person on the streets of Taipei struggling to find his way. To avoid the pain of being ordinary, to keep his parents bound to his side, his subconscious mind issues an order called body, create terror immediately. And the body complies perfectly. This is Adlerian teleology. You do not shout at someone because you are overwhelmed by anger. You choose the tool of anger because your purpose is to dominate them, intimidate them, and make them submit to your will. You do not live a painful life because your past was unfortunate. You choose to cling tightly to your current pain because it serves your purpose of staying exactly where you are, avoiding the terrifying risks that come with trying to change. When I first truly comprehended the depth of teleology, I felt as if I had been completely stripped naked and forced to stand in front of a mirror with nowhere left to hide. Adler systematically dismantles our final sanctuaries. He forces us to realize that our current reality, no matter how miserable, frustrating, or stagnant it might seem, is something we have personally selected in every single moment to serve a specific purpose. Now, if we are the ones choosing our own lives, why do so many of us spend our days feeling so incredibly exhausted and overwhelmed? Adler provides his second brilliant blade, and it is called the separation of tasks. These 4 words are the ultimate antidote to modern social anxiety, people-pleasing, and psychological burnout. Adler states with absolute clarity that all problems are interpersonal relationship problems. And these problems arise almost entirely because we foolishly intrude upon other people's tasks, or because we allow other people to intrude upon ours. So how do we determine whose task it is? The rule is deceptively simple. You merely need to ask called who ultimately undergoes the result of the decision that is made. Let us look at a classic familial dynamic. Parents spend every day screaming at their child, forcing them to study late into the night, demanding that they get into medical school or secure a stable government job. They tell the child that if they do not comply, they are being deeply ungrateful and disrespectful. This is a severe intrusion upon the child's task. Why? Because the person who actually has to do the studying is the child. The person who has to live that specific professional life for the next 40 years is the child. The one who bears the ultimate consequence of that career choice is the child, not the parents. Therefore, whether to study and what career path to choose is strictly the child's task. On the flip side, the anxiety, the fear of losing face, or the disappointment that the parents feel when they watch their child walk a different path is an internal emotional task that belongs entirely to the parents. It is their responsibility to manage their own feelings, not the child's. Now, let us bring this exact concept into a scene that every modern professional and creator knows all too well: the digital landscape. Suppose you go online and publish a genuine article or record a video sharing your honest insights on the current financial markets, or perhaps your raw critique of a popular movie. Within a few hours, the comments section is flooded with trolls and cynical critics. They mock your ideas, misinterpret your words, and attack your character. Suddenly, your entire week is ruined. You cannot focus on your work, you lose your appetite, you lie awake at 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling, wondering what you did wrong. Adler would look at you, shake his head, and say called you have crossed the boundary once again. Expressing your authentic thoughts, putting your ideas out into the universe with honesty and vulnerability, that is your task. But how people receive your words, whether they choose to admire you, ignore you, misunderstand you, or hate you with a passion, that is their task. It has absolutely nothing to do with you. You can be the most brilliant, compassionate, and articulate person on the planet, and someone out there will still choose to despise you. You cannot control their minds, and you were never meant to. If the goal of your life is to fulfill the expectations of everyone else, if you live to ensure that not a single soul ever dislikes you, then you have handed the remote control of your emotional existence to complete strangers who do not even know who you truly are. When you master the art of the separation of tasks, you realize that the overwhelming, tangled web of human relationships can be neatly resolved. You just take the scissors of separation and make a clean cut. Their emotions are their task. My choices are my task. I choose to extend kindness to you because that aligns with my values, which makes it my task. Whether you decide to return that kindness to me or throw it back in my face is your task. When you can divide reality this cleanly, the heavy, suffocating pressure to please the entire world finally lifts from your shoulders. As someone who spends every single day working with words, using my voice, and putting content out into the public eye where it is constantly measured by metrics and judgment, I have to be completely honest with you. My relationship with Adler's philosophy is deeply complicated. It is filled with genuine, ongoing internal struggle. On one hand, I am incredibly grateful for this book. It has been a saving grace during moments when I found myself drowning in data anxiety, staring at fluctuating views, or feeling wounded by irrational, cruel comments on the internet. In those quiet moments of despair, this book acts like a bucket of ice water poured over my head. It reminds me called Jenny, your worth as a human being is not an algorithm. Your existence does not require the validation of temporary praise or transient metrics. Those bitter words left by critics are a reflection of their own internal chaos, which means it is their task, not yours. The separation of tasks has literally pulled me out of the quicksand of self-doubt on more nights than I can count. It has beautifully illuminated the core of my life philosophy, which is to reclaim my own sovereignty and live with an upright, unshakable spirit. But on the other hand, as I sit here looking at these pages, I have to admit that there is a part of me that feels deeply unsettled by Adler's words. There is an undercurrent of coldness in his philosophy that can feel almost inhumane. When you take teleology to its absolute extreme, it can sound dangerously close to a form of intellectual cruelty. Think about someone who is trapped in the crushing darkness of clinical depression, or someone who has just experienced the devastating, catastrophic loss of a child. If we walk up to them and say called the only reason you cannot move forward is because you are choosing to stay in pain for a specific purpose, because you are using your grief to avoid reality, is that truly an act of wisdom? Is that actually kindness? I believe that there are certain traumas in this human experience whose sheer weight far exceeds the capacity of human logic and willpower. If we attribute 100% of every misfortune, every emotional collapse, and every life limitation solely to individual choice and purpose, do we not run the risk of erasing our biological vulnerabilities? Do we not completely ignore the massive, systemic inequalities of social structure, class, and pure, random luck that shape human lives? Sometimes, what a suffering human being needs is not a sharp lecture on teleology. They do not need to be told to separate their tasks. What they need is simply a safe place to weep. They need an empathetic embrace, a quiet validation that allows them to temporarily fall apart within the framework of cause and effect. I believe the greatest limitation of this book is that it slices the immense, beautiful, and messy complexity of human nature into neat categories of black and white. It is a magnificent, flawless philosophy for the strong. But for those who are currently being tossed around by the violent storms of life, those who are struggling just to find the strength to stand upright, this uncompromising demand for absolute self-mastery can easily transform into an incredibly heavy, isolating moral burden. We have journeyed through a remarkable landscape today. We explored the deep physical vulnerabilities of Adler's childhood and his stubborn defiance against a predetermined fate. We analyzed teleology, the concept that completely flips our understanding of cause and effect on its head. And we examined the separation of tasks, that vital tool designed to sever the roots of interpersonal anxiety. Ultimately, this philosophy does not ask us to become selfish, cold, or disconnected from humanity. It asks us to do something much more profound. It challenges us to stand firmly on our own 2 feet, completely centered in our own truth, even when the world around us is screaming. If you are looking for a small, actionable experiment to try this coming week, I want to invite you to join me in practicing one simple thing. This week, the very next time someone hurls an unreasonable demand at you, or the moment you feel yourself starting to drown in someone else's chaotic emotional wake, I want you to pause. Take a deep, conscious breath, and say these words silently to yourself. This is their task, not mine. And then, gently turn your attention back to your own life. Focus on what you want to have for dinner tonight. Notice the rhythm of your own footsteps as you walk down the street. Check in on whether your shoulders are relaxed, and see if you can offer a gentle, genuine smile to yourself in the mirror. Thank you so much for coming to sit and chat with me today. The courage to be disliked is, at its deepest level, the willingness to finally let go. It is the courage to allow other people to take full ownership of their own emotions while you take ownership of yours. I hope this truth can become like a small, smooth stone tucked safely inside your pocket this week. A quiet weight that you can reach for in those moments when you feel yourself beginning to sway, bringing you back to a place of deep, unshakable peace. Have a beautiful week, and I will see you next weekend.